You're listening to On Mission with Dr. Matt Davis, a podcast designed to explore the personal mission of everyday leaders. Hear from men and women who are making a difference in their corner of the world and discover what keeps them on mission. But I am thrilled to be joined in the studio today by Mike Saunders, president of Marketing Huddle, the authority positioning coach, and I can't wait to explore a little bit more about what that is all about. Mike lives in Denver, Colorado with his wife, Laura. They have 4 children, all in their 20s. And Mike's first job was working at Mickey D's, McDonald's. His favorite meal is Chinese, not McDonald's.
Right.
And his favorite sports team is the Denver Broncos. Mike, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Good to be here. Thanks for having me.
So the Denver Broncos, let's see.
Oh, we're starting there.
Russell Wilson is quarterback? Is that still happening?
Revolving
or
door.
Are we on to something else?
No, they cut him this past week.
Okay, with the Russell Wilson.
Yep.
We like Russell Wilson here in Wisconsin. He was a Wisconsin guy. But not good enough for the Broncos.
Apparently
no one can
not.
live up to the, John Elway, Peyton Manning
era. That's the
who
latest.
else would be the
I can't
greatest and
think
latest?
the greatest, but ever since then,
Nobody.
it's a revolving door. Yeah.
But hope springs eternal. Maybe you can get Justin Fields from the Bears. He seems like he's going to be available. And there's another fine franchise that I usually try to root for, at least during the regular season. Then I got to find another team during the playoffs. You know how that goes. All right. So what'd you learn working at McDonald's?
That was a minute ago. So I don't know that I
You can't
could
think back
put
to the
a
wonderful
lesson
life
on
lesson.
that. I will say that using the things we know about McDonald's and the concept, I will say that franchising.
Oh yeah.
And having a set template of here's the steps, follow the rules. It's a proven process. Trust the process.
Yeah.
I think that is a concept that I think bodes well in a lot of areas of life.
What was minimum wage when you started at McDonald's?
I do remember that.
Yeah.
$3.35.
$3.35. Very nice.
So that you now know that it's been more than a minute.
Yeah, for sure. I think it was I got a training wage when I first started my first job when I was 16. It was less than $3 an hour.
Yeah.
And I had to go in and beg the owner of the little grocery store. I said, hey, I've been working here 6 weeks at $2.85. I mean, is there a point at which I could at least get minimum wage? So he got mad at me and threatened to fire me for bringing it up. And that's when I realized I was not working for a good employer. All right, so I'm sure you've had lots of better and more interesting jobs since then. But as we explore on the On Mission podcast the concept of a mission in life, I wonder if there's some particular way that you would articulate your mission in life.
I think that if you look back at the McDonald's days and say, what would the mission there be versus now?
Yeah.
I think we all would look at and say, I want success. And what does that look like for anyone?
Yeah.
And it would be a whole different ball game compared to now.
Yeah.
So you look at someone that's 16 and you think, give me, success in cars and everything else. And now I would say over the last 20, 25 years, it has just shifted from grinding and success and more to the significance of giving back and really watching for and living in the moment of God's will. And I know that sounds really cliche, but I think that more and more when you look back and go, you know what, the Old Testament speaks of all of the ways that God came through for the children of Israel, no matter what they did, because they would turn their back on him and he still comes through. And if you could look back in your life and go, you know what, look at that one time when, and I remember when this was hard and God came through. And so when you can feel that gratitude to where you've come from through God's leading, and then you tie that into where do I want to now take and go to the next level. I would say my purpose is to honor and glorify God in all that I do personally and professionally, and to show other people how to do the same thing, whether it's personally or professionally, family, and in business with clients. And I find that, in our brains, we've got this section called the reticular activator. And it basically it reminds you of what you have been exposed to. And the more you say and watch for and do and say, I want to teach people how to follow the Lord, you will find opportunities for that. And I find it over and over and over again.
Yeah, there's a particular awareness that develops, and when you are looking for something versus when you're just sort of going through life doing your own thing with your head down. And that awareness, especially an awareness of others, I'm not sure that's a natural tendency of the human condition. It seems like our natural tendency is to look out for myself, to be self-absorbed, and we see plenty of examples of that in the world. But you're talking about an others orientation that isn't just for the sake of being kind and nice, which, yes, we should all do, but you're talking about an others orientation for the purpose of pointing them to God.
Yeah.
But you're not a pastor.
Yeah, that's interesting. So BAM, B-A-M, business as mission, is a concept. And I feel like we as, you can be a Christian in business, or you could be a Christian businessman or woman, and there's a difference. You can just go out and punch the clock and be in business and go to church on the weekend, or you can be fully 2 feet in a kingdom. And I'll even say, in my opinion, there's a difference between being a Christian business and a kingdom-focused business, because a Christian business tends to be someone that's just like, we believe in these values. A kingdom-focused business is one that is watching for those areas to be able to give back. And I think that too many times people think, I work Monday through Friday, Monday through Saturday, and I go to church. In fact, I go to church twice a week on Sunday. Check that box.
Yeah.
But the problem is they feel like that it's Monday through Saturday, and then that's my business identity. And then Sunday, there's my spiritual. But there's an integration that happens, and there is no delineation. And I remember reading a book by Ken Allred called The Integrated Life, and he talks about how we must just feel like we wake up and we are in it to win it. And if you are focused on being a kingdom-focused business person, it doesn't matter whether you're working in your, given career field or at church, because I can talk about business at church. I can talk about spiritual things in my business. I can pray for clients. I can pray with clients. I can exhibit the character traits of Christ in my day-to-day business, which then becomes that living testimony.
Well, you're throwing a lot out there, and I think you've already articulated 3 very different kinds of Christian professionalism, if we were going to use a phrase like that, or Christian approach to life or secular business. Let's put that label on it. And you're talking about the first level is this guy that says, I'm a Christian in everything, but I'm very secular about my work ethic. I have heard that from lawyers. I've heard that from business people, some version or another of that. And I think what they mean by that is that I'm not some kind of Bible banger. I'm not going to embarrass people by, being all holier than thou at the workplace. I'm not going to harass people with my faith. That's personal to me. And when I'm at work, I don't let that stuff interfere with me making a buck and doing whatever I need to do to be financially successful at this business. Almost as if that's a virtue, that they are, doing that for the sake of these other people who don't believe like they do, right? And I think hogwash, you're probably not even a believer, because there is literally no such thing as taking off your Christian hat and putting it in a drawer for 6 days a week and then putting it back on Sunday. So that's kind of your first level. It seems like then you're talking about a second level, which says, okay, I want to start this process of integrating, and so I want to learn Christian business principles. I want to start to apply them into my workplace or into my work effort at whatever level of influence I have. And that's a sort of an emerging thought process of growth, which is not a bad thing at all. But if we're not careful, if we leave it there, I think we probably end up in a position where we're using the Proverbs as a little get-rich-quick scheme, like it's a formula, and we say, well, maybe if I use this Christian principle, I can kind of do what I really want to do anyway, but kind of Christianize it or that kind of thing. And that's really not the right approach to the scriptures either, because the Bible doesn't really promise us financial success in life. It promises us that if we honor the Lord, that he will reward us in eternity. And I do believe that there are sound Christian business principles throughout the scriptures, and we teach those to our business students as well. But it's not for the sake necessarily of just financial well-being, okay? But you're really talking about a third level, and I want to explore that level most interesting of all, this kind of integration of all of my life being about pursuing God's glory no matter what field that I am in, and helping others to do the same. So how does that person approach life and business differently than maybe those other two levels?
I would say that probably one of the biggest conundrums in life is, what's God's will for your life?
Sure.
And what is your purpose? Mm-hmm. And I think if we were to poll 1,000,000, 100 or whatever Christians, they would check the box and go, I'm confused as much as the next person. And I think that so many times you're striving for that, Lord, tell me what your will is for my life. And then, I found my purpose in life, which is fill in the blank. But then what if life happens and things shift? Does that mean that now I am out of God's will or my purpose? Meaning, let's say that you were called to be a whatever business person or work in this job, and then something changes and now you just change careers a little bit, fields. Does that mean that the initial field was not God's will? Of course not. And I've grown up for 50 plus years as a Christian, and I remember about 2 years ago, I was at a Christian networking group, and the keynote speaker made this comment, and he wrote a book, and I read his book, and it was just spectacular, and it really was just really neat, and none of it was revelatory, but it just made so much sense. But he said this: our purpose is easy, to honor and glorify God with all of our hearts, minds, souls.
Easy
and
to say.
Since that is the case, that is your purpose in life. And your platform is what you do day to day to accomplish that.
Right.
So your platform can be, I'm going to start my business in whatever field, and I'm going to do everything that I can to honor and glorify the Lord with all my heart and mind and soul. But then what if, the economy changes, and now that platform, when you started this business, shifts to now, I'm going to start this business in a whole other field. Great, no problem. Your platform still is the vehicle to leverage and optimize glorifying God. And then let's just say that you go, you know what? Self-employment, entrepreneurship is not for me. I got an opportunity to go work in this company. Great. Now your platform shifts, but your purpose never does.
I love that thought, because the platform is what a lot of people answer with when you ask them about their purpose in life.
Right.
And they're maybe confusing those two things. And
Yeah.
there's a major problem with that, because if you begin to identify the platform as your identity, as your purpose, and then the platform isn't this kind of unbroken line of successful trajectory, upward mobility, now you begin to suffer all kinds of anxieties and self-image problems and depression and all of these kinds of cascading collapse internally, and even spiritually you begin to struggle because you've got your whole identity wrapped up in something that was never really meant to be a lifelong thing.
I think that identity is a toxic word in today's culture, and it's been for decades. You think about this. You mentioned sports and the Broncos and whatnot. I've got a friend of mine that used to play professional sports, and now he's a business owner, and he just literally last week was at a meeting I was at, and he was talking about, hey, back when I was in pro sports, and people would say, what do you do? Or they think of me, I'm a pro sports player. Well, now, in that transition, who are you? I've got friends that have been in the military. When they transition to civilian life, their identity. Well, if we can say, what do you do for a living? Or what do you do? Or tell me about yourself. If your identity is tied up in that thing, even if it's in that platform, all of a sudden, when those shifts over time can really be a blow against your identity. We need to focus on our identity being who we are in Christ and who he says we are. And then when we focus on a platform to accomplish our purpose, glorifying the Lord, then that can shift and bob and weave. But if our identity is anchored in Christ and our purpose is anchored in glorifying him, all kinds of things can change, but we're still consistent.
Yeah, I have gone through that personally as an attorney. That is an identity.
Yeah.
It's not just a job or a profession. It's not just a role that we play. It sort of changes who you are. The training for it is intense, and it's psychological and damaging probably. But you don't come out the same person. And so for most of my life, all of my professional life, somebody asked me, what are you? I would probably answer, I'm a lawyer. Before, and my wife knows this, I would say father, husband, any of these other roles that I have. I think maybe men in particular tend to identify with their profession.
Yeah.
And so the success or failure of that profession has a profound impact on our self-perception. And so if I ever lost that, I think it would really unmoor me, if I wasn't. Now, I'm not practicing as an attorney, and that's the part that I say, as I look back, I had to be okay with. I had to kind of really take a long pause and go,
but here's what I will submit to you. I feel like where God leads us, we bloom where we're planted, and then when something happens and we move laterally or up or over, and you go to the next stage in your career, you find that the lessons you learned are being used. So your position here, I'll bet you that probably every single day you draw on some of your legal training, your leadership training. And so now all of a sudden you're in a whole different field, but yet you wouldn't be doing what you're doing now as effectively as you're doing now if you hadn't had that prior training. And I think that that's what we need to draw from and realize that we're doing everything we're doing to the glory of the Lord. And thank you, Lord, that I had that training decades ago, years ago, because now I'm able to do this thing right here so much better.
Yeah, that's no question. But there's probably another angle on that. And that is that even if your life has had some downturns and you have had some challenges that you've had to overcome, some maybe devastating failures, you're probably at a point eventually you look back and you can say, that also was a stepping stone to where I'm at now. Mm-hmm. And we all like to, get past those things before we have a little bit of space and clarity to make that assessment. But in time, most of us can look back and say, you know what, and even maybe, dare I say, be thankful for those things.
Yeah. Well, a lot of times when I do speaking, and this applies, I will say, okay, hey, finish the sentence. You win or you? And the audience goes, lose. And I'm like, no, you don't win or you lose. You win or you learn. And so if and when those missteps or mistakes come up, if you handle it the right way and learn from it, then the next time something similar to that comes up, you're like, oop, I've been there, done that. I've learned from that. And so now here's what we're going to do a little bit differently to move through that successfully.
So what is the Marketing Huddle, and how did that all come about? Are you one of these like motivational speaker, life coach type guys, or what? What have you created?
There's elements in that, sure. Okay. Yeah. So I got into the mortgage banking industry back in the late 90s and just rode the wave.
Yeah.
And anybody that knows that industry, boy, it was just the wave of all waves.
Like
and
printing money there for a while.
Money just grew on trees, and I was really good at what I did, and it was just wonderful until it wasn't. There's this little thing, and for the listeners that can Google this, and around 2007, 2008, that continued on to 2009, 10, 11, and 12, there's this thing called the economic crisis. And in the housing industry, it just pulled the rug out, and it just disappeared. So I was in that industry, and I had learned a lot of things and made a lot of connections. But when that happened, my career was just gone. It just went up in a puff of smoke. And I didn't have the fortitude to try to wait it out and try to figure it out. So I went, my wife says, you read all the time, and all you read is business books. So why don't you just go back and do your MBA? And so I did my MBA at age 40, did it online, and got into one of my classes was how to write and build a business and marketing plan, and pick a hypothetical business. I'm like, oh, hey, I want to start a marketing firm, and it just came about. Well, I launched my marketing firm in the midst of the mess. And that was really, really hard. So I started off doing marketing, air quotes, and as trying to fill the gap and have a support a family, I was taking on anybody and anything that related to marketing.
And just doing every kind of marketing.
Anything.
Yeah.
And we could do a masterclass on that one topic, how big of a mistake that was. Because when you try to be all things to all people, you are no things to nobody. And so what I did was, the long story short there is it hit me around 7 years in that I got to specialize. And so I started specializing marketing into authority positioning, which when you are seen as an entrepreneur, when you're seen as an expert authority, now you separate yourself from the competition and all your other marketing works that much better. So I just offloaded and stopped doing all the tactical things, and I started focusing on how to help entrepreneurs look like and be perceived as an expert authority by using podcasting, publicity, and publishing. And when they have their brand, personal and professional brand, highlighted in that realm, now all of a sudden their competitors are fading into the distance. They start standing out from the crowd. Their words and their strategies start being received that much better. So I, you said motivational speaker. Yeah, I find myself, that's kind of where I live, because I am constantly and never ending improving myself personally, professionally, spiritually, and that integrates in with my business. And I find that when I give that much more value and giving and serving, and even in advance of doing business, that really tends to really set the right stage. So I do all things marketing, but I am focused on one thing, which is authority positioning, and it's really, really neat to see that even as I dial in deeper and deeper into that specialty, it just really it opens up opportunity.
And there are so many more tools now for people to establish an expertise or a reputation as an authority in a particular field than maybe 10, 15 years ago. And it seems like you've been able to leverage some of the technology platforms, the Amazon kind of publishing arm, where people can get a book out there, get their name out there as an author, and that kind of helps generate business. Is that kind of the concept of authority positioning?
Yeah. You think about, hey, I've got a podcast. How many downloads do you have? It doesn't matter. Hey, you wrote a book. How many copies have you sold? It doesn't matter. Because I always say having your book elevate your credibility to such levels that should get doors opened for you to create a strategic alliance or have those prospective clients at least listen to what you have to say. There's an old Canadian philosopher by the name of Marshall McLuhan. He wrote a book called The Medium is the Message, and it's a really strange book, but one of the teachings that he came out with is message delivery. And one of the takeaways is where your content is seen gives as much value, if not more value, than the actual content. So you can have a solution for some problem, whatever industry that you're in. Here's the solution to this problem, and you write that into a wonderful 3-page PDF that just encapsulates everything that you can do to meet the client's needs. People ignore it if you email it to them. You put it up on your blog post. Yeah, it's a blog post. Ignore. Oh, I'm going to put it on LinkedIn. That's nice. But all of a sudden, that same content is featured in a book, featured in the media, on a podcast interview. Now people sit up and take note. Oh, you want Spotify? Oh, I'm going to check that out. Oh, my word. You've got a book on Amazon, and I'm going to check that out. So the message is delivered and perceived and received so much at a higher level because of what medium and what platform that it's in.
There's a corollary for that in the law. We oftentimes as attorneys laugh about the magical value that is attached to a document in a court, in a trial. So if an eyewitness comes in and describes what happens, people go, they're judging the credibility. The guy was kind of slouching down in his seat, and he had some, kind of strange facial hair, and I don't know what was going on. And they just kind of start to cast judgment on it and pick it apart. If he was to write all that down in like a journal, same thing, same guy, same impression, same content, but put it in a different format, all of a sudden that document has this like miraculous weight, because now it's entered into evidence, and it's got an exhibit number, and it was approved by the judge as evidence, which it's a very low bar, and the jury can feel it and look at it and read it. All of a sudden, the exact same message is given more weight because of its medium.
Yeah.
And I think maybe that's the same thing. I don't know if that's just how we're built psychologically or just kind of tapping into something that's
there's
naturally...
a study also, and I'm really big. I teach marketing at 4 universities, and so I'm always keyed into if I say something, you have to back it up. You write a paper, you better have some citations and research links. So many times when I'm doing presentations on authority, I'm laying the groundwork for why do people trust people in positions of authority? Here's a police officer in a uniform. That's a position of authority. You tend, hopefully, to trust that person. Well, there's a study from back in the 50s, and it's talk about how people will respond to authority. And it was done at Yale University, and someone was in a white lab coat and with a clipboard, and you mentioned you think about in these police TV shows where you look through the window and they can't see you, but you can see them. Mm-hmm. So they set this up where over there in the window or past the window is someone at the table hooked up to electrodes. Yep. And here is the person with the white lab coat and the clipboard, and the volunteer is the mark that we're doing the test on. Right. And basically, and you can Google all of this, and this is out there written in psychology, publications. But basically, they were saying you ask these questions, press the button. When that person answers it, if it's right, here comes the green light. If it's wrong, red light, and they're going to get an electric shock. Every subsequent wrong answer, it's going to be more and more and more powerful. In Stanley Milgram was the name of the researcher that did this. Well, they had predicted that like 3.73% of people would continue through this whole long shocking process. But when they objected, the researcher with the white lab coat would not even look up and say, "You must continue." Okay, well, let me ask the other question. There is no question. You must continue. And so they predicted that 3.73% would continue. Otherwise,
even past they said was
right. They were like, I can't do this. I can't.
Painful.
That guy's in pain. 68% of the people went all the way to the very end. The point is, people in a position of authority, people will trust. Yeah. People in a position of authority. Now, in
that case, it was just the perception of authority.
Yes, because there was no shocking. Right, but it was on a college campus. Yeah. There was a researcher with a white lab coat and a clipboard. They were speaking. And, there's so many things we can pull out of this as a lesson. They were speaking with the authority. Imagine if you were standing up and you had the cure for whatever, and the doctor's like, "Well, we kind of really think that this would be a good cure for this disease." No, but if you can speak from that position of authority with confidence, that all of a sudden then helps people sway people to your opinion. Now, it's got to be backed up. So I think that there's so many things that we can communicate, where it's being, the platforms and the mediums like we mentioned, the tone, our own confidence. But my work with, and I specialize in financial services, but my work with entrepreneurs, all of a sudden when I am doing this and handing it to them and amplifying their expertise, and they're not having to wait 6 months to maybe get discovered by this podcaster to interview them, or 2 years to get maybe published by this publisher. When I'm doing it, handing it to them, now all of a sudden their own inner confidence grows, because it's like, oh wow, that I'm out there on Spotify. And when I put that out there, my clients really responded well and complimented me, and I spoke well. And all of a sudden now it becomes this cycle where it's like the more and more and more that they are realizing, have you ever heard of imposter syndrome?
Oh yeah.
So they have a tinge of imposter syndrome. And now
I
when
think
they
everybody naturally does.
They naturally
in the
do.
Early days. Yeah.
But when you get that affirmation that, oh, that's good job on that. Now you kind of sit up a little bit higher and speak a little bit more confident. And then the very next time you go out to meet with that prospect or that client, you're speaking a little bit more powerfully in that authority positioning. So I specialized helping to position someone's authority and teach them how to get that. But rather than just teaching them, I just do it. And I help someone become an Amazon best-selling author without writing a word. I interview them, and I get them featured in the media, get them on a ABC, CBS, NBC news affiliate. And when they can say to their clients, "Hey, look, I was just interviewed on this Fox, look at my 3-minute video interview. I was on a Fox News affiliate." Now all of a sudden it's like, oh. And so what happens is you are then perceived not as a salesperson, but as a trusted advisor, because of how they're coming into that relationship. And I'm a huge book reader, so I've mentioned a couple already. Here's another wonderful one. Dr. Robert Cialdini, 30 years ago, wrote a book called Influence, all on how we're influenced. A few years ago, he wrote a book called Persuasion, and it's basically how you can pre-frame your authority and expertise so that you have influence. Well, many times right before an interaction, whether it's a sales, or a marketing opportunity, if that prospect realizes, oh, well, you were featured and they're going to come into that trusting what you have to say a little bit better than if you were just that pushy used car salesman type person.
Yeah, and in the legal advising we used to do as people would call in, I quickly found that, at first you have that imposter syndrome. I'm a freshly minted lawyer right out of law school. People are calling me with problems I'd never heard of, and I'm giving them advice. And
you're like, who am I?
My advice is, borrowed over from the more senior lawyers that tell me what to tell, and And you go home and you go, why would they listen to me? You have that kind of in your head at first. And then you start to see that it works and you begin to trust it yourself and you start to see that you're helping and actually making a difference. And there's some confidence that comes along with that. But then there's always that subset where somebody calls, they want help, they need help, but it's kind of like, I don't know if I trust you. I don't know if I want to do that, because what I'm asking them to do is going to have a price tag. It's going to have, not necessarily to me, but to them. And that's where it all comes down to that trust factor. If you're in professional services in any respect, your success is almost dependent. Their success and yours are tied together. And it all comes down to whether they're going to trust you enough to do what you're
Have you ever heard
advising
of
them
the
to do.
KLT factor?
No.
The know, like, and trust. And there's an author that I really like. I've interviewed him several times, Bob Burke. He wrote a book called The Go Giver. And he's famous for saying, all things being equal, people want to do business with those that they know, like, and trust. Well, how do they know about you? Well, visibility, awareness. How do they like you? Well, that, now we're starting to get to know each other. Then where does that trust come in? And that leads to credibility, which then sets the stage for maybe having them listen to what you can do to solve their problem, whatever that is. But it cannot be the old school sell, tell, push, deadline, scarcity, buy this right now. What's it going to take to get you in this vehicle, let's say? It's got to be teaching and educating and being their advocate and having that genuine care for them. In reality, salespeople are taught, don't have that quote unquote commission breath, because people can tell. If you need to make that sale because your mortgage is due and you're pushing, they can just tell you've got commission breath. But you've got to almost take that approach of, just tell me a little bit about what are you dealing with? What's the problem with whatever the industry that you're in? And okay, well, let me clarify now. When you say this, do you really mean? Well, let me just show you. Here's some options. Here's some things to think about. And maybe if the sale is not made right that moment, maybe there are some educational, authoritative pieces you can get to that person later after the fact to go, hey, it was nice meeting you yesterday. I was thinking, here's this article you might want to consider reading through. Let me know if you have any questions. Have a great day. And now here's the other people they're talking to, because guess what? You are never the only one they talk to. They're always talking to someone else. So those people are typically not doing it the right way. And they're being pushy.
You're competing with bad
And
advice.
when you come off as that trustworthy, credible, authoritative teacher, the heart of a teacher, now all of a sudden they're like, just something about that person. Yeah, so let me ask you this question. So now, should I consider? And now all of a sudden you take that Stanley Milgram study of people trust people in a position of authority. There's some responsibility to that.
Oh, absolutely.
If you know the psychology of swaying people to your side of the equation and your opinion, you can do some things and put someone in a bad product. And guess what? I mentioned to you the economic crisis, the housing crisis, toxic mortgages, if you remember that, and there were lenders out there putting people knowingly into toxic mortgages that were just literally a time bomb ready to explode. Yikes. That was using authority and the positioning that they were in the wrong way. So we have to be careful with that.
You ever created a monster? You talk about, pumping people up and setting them up as experts. I suppose there's a risk that,
I guess there could be
out there kind of betrays all of that and uses that power for
evil.
Yeah, for evil.
Enter the moi. Right.
So you are not shy about your Christian testimony. I found your story on your own website, and you you kind of just put it out there. Hey, I'm a believer.
Yeah.
The most important thing to me is my relationship with Jesus Christ. Here's a link to my personal testimony, how you also can have a relationship with the Lord. A lot of Christians are kind of scared to do that. They're afraid that it'll hurt their business, but you're just like right there on your website. Are you worried it's going to make you a target or maybe lose you some business?
No. And I have had one time in the last 10, 15 years where I felt targeted, where someone that I actually did business
you're in
with.
Denver, so like, Jack the Baker and all that stuff is out there.
That's
so
down,
Christian
down the road.
businesses are not,
Yeah.
it's not hypothetical. They could be targeted.
It was one pebble in the ocean of a time where it's like it became a target. But here's where I feel like, if every word out of your mouth was, oh, well, according to John 3:16, we cannot feel pushy and pushing our faith out there. But if I have that on my website, my LinkedIn, I've got Proverbs 6:9 on my email signature. And so sometimes people they don't even pick up on that. Sometimes that's the thing that triggers people. They're like, oh my word, I'm so glad, they'll email back and go, I'm so glad you've got that because and it just opens up wonderful conversation. So I think that there are ways that you can have things out there so that if it just taps the right person on the shoulder, other people, let's just say a non-Christian sees that and they're like, I don't relate to that, but cool, I'm glad he's got pure values. So it can work for you that way as well. I've never been inundated, barraged, nothing like that. But I think that what happens is in marketing, there should be and could be an aspect of polarization. Mm-hmm. When you can polarize your audience and go, I am for this, that means you're against that. And if you are for something, whatever that is, I could say I'm a Denver Bronco fan. Well, someone out there is not. And so they're going to not, be attracted to be in having
Seattle
that personal
people.
conversation. Correct. So, but I think if you can polarize your audience and do it in a caring way, and now I'm a kingdom-focused believer. I'm a kingdom-focused business owner, and it's like you said, it's right on my website. In fact, not just like, oh yeah, I'm just beneath the surface. I've got the plan of salvation on my website, and that's wonderful. And when people see that, I think that it really does help to open up conversations. I've had times of praying with clients. I will text literally this past week, a client's wife went in for surgery, and I was able to email or text and go, hey, praying for your wife. Oh man, that really means so much. And sometimes it moves to a deeper conversation or another conversation. And sometimes it's just like, what an encouragement. Thank you so much. And there are more and more and more times. I work out of my house for the last 15 years. COVID didn't affect me at all because I've always lived on Zoom and virtual and all that. But many times Laura will walk by or say later, like, I heard you quoting scripture to someone on the phone. And I'm like, it just came up.
Yeah.
It just came out. And
wow.
And not that you're going to do that when the door is not open, but many times when you are in that kind of a conversation, you just like something just comes up and it just becomes a really fulfilling conversation.
And your counsel would be when the Holy Spirit opens that door, don't hesitate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it doesn't need to be long and belabored. It doesn't have to be, it could just be that one little word. And it could just be like just opening the door like, hey, you know what? You could tell from my LinkedIn and my website where I come from. And let me just tell you, here's kind of the way that I would approach that. And if you'd ever like to talk down the road, let me know. But what I really want to continue with, and so in other words, you don't need to just right there for belabor that. Just that one little nugget, many times is the door opening for that to come back. And if it does, it does. If it doesn't, it doesn't.
Dr. Marriott calls those gospel bombs. You just kind of plant them out there, and it may go off.
Bruce Wilkinson wrote the book The Prayer of Jabez, and he calls it Jabez moments.
Okay,
where it's just like you just got to be aware. You got to be open and aware. And I've said this so many times, and this is so important. We tend to program ourselves and to run 1 billion miles an hour, striving and grinding to get whatever, that level of success that we've talked about before. And if and when we do that and we miss an opportunity that's right before us because we're rushing to the next thing, it could be a moment of encouraging someone. It could be a moment of praying with someone. It could be all kinds of things. So we need to be human beings versus human doings. Okay. the scripture, be still and know that I'm God. Many times we feel like we're sprinting ahead going, God, keep up. Come on, let's go.
But the eternal economy was all of that other sprinting and stuff was to create this moment of opportunity with that individual where their spiritual need became apparent, and a child of God was there to speak truth to them in that.
So don't miss out on that.
Time.
Right.
Yeah. So many times with clients, you have that opportunity as a lawyer. So many times in education, I've been dealing with secular colleagues, and something comes up about a family member in crisis or illness or something, and I'll say, you know what? We'll pray for you. I was shocked one time, totally secular relationship with a vendor that was here, mentioned that their daughter was having a surgery, and Dr. Marriott and I were in the room, and we just said, you know, hey, we'll be praying for you. And you know what? He stopped and he said, would you do that right now?
Wow. And
we said, yeah. So we stopped. Yeah. We weren't talking about Genzabar or whatever product anymore. Now all of a sudden we're focused on this man's life and his real world worries and problems. And here's a guy who doesn't know how to pray.
Yeah.
And, you know, unsaved people probably think that Christians have some mystical pipeline to God, and if we'll put in a word for him, that'll do the trick. Okay. It's all a big mystery, right? But what you're doing is unfolding to them a different way of life and a reality of looking at the world through spiritual eyes. And they don't, when it's personal, when it's private, they don't mock.
Yeah.
They crave something tangibly real.
And here's a challenge for us all. How many times have we heard something and maybe an email or a phone call or whatever? Oh, I'll be praying. Well, here's the challenge. Do it and check back with that person.
Yeah, that's powerful.
Like a week or two later, hey, just checking in. Been praying for you, and how's things going with that?
No one does that.
Right.
And when someone does, whoa.
Right.
Yeah, that is the establishment of a true relationship.
Yeah.
At that moment, it was like, oh, you mean it was more than just a platitude or a thing you say to get the sale or manipulate. And and honestly, for children of God, that is the reality of why we're still here. I mean, why don't we just get raptured out of the world the moment of salvation? We're here to continue to have an influence, and a gospel influence at that. And so you say, is there such a thing as a Christian professional? And the idea is, who better to accomplish the Great Commission than those Christian professionals out in the world and that are given influence and influential opportunities?
Well, think about if we split up a 24-hour day, and hypothetically, if you sleep 8 hours, right? And hypothetically, if you work 8 hours, and, you know, the big emphasis on hypothetically, because we know that thriving, striving entrepreneur business people don't only work 8 hours a day. And that also, but if it was 8, and 8, the majority of our time is spent in the marketplace. 5 to 6 days a week, 5.5, whatever that is, a majority of time is spent in the marketplace. Contrast that to our time at church. Now, my family and I go Sunday morning, Sunday night, and Wednesday night, and that is what we do. But even if it's just Sunday, contrast that with your 5.5 days of work, your mission field, the business as a mission, that concept, you have so much more opportunity and so much more opportunity to come across people that are in need and hurting, whatever that might look like.
Right.
And so if we can be aware of that, it doesn't mean that you have to stop the presses and get up on a soapbox and grab your family, giant print family Bible. No, it just means be human. You've heard of business to business, B2C, B2B. I say H to H. We got to be human to human. Yes. And being real is rare these days.
I agree with you 1,000%. I would add to that, you ought to be prepared, though. And you shouldn't use it as an excuse not to be prepared. You ought to be well-studied. You ought to know God's word. You ought to have some solutions ready at hand. And you ought to anticipate that when God opens that door, you'll be ready to go through.
Well, you think about a professional athlete, professional musician, let's say, professional actor. Those three, let's just pick those three. The best ones out there are the ones that make it look so easy. and effortless.
Yeah.
But I bet you decades ago, they were fumbling, bumbling like us. People
Oh,
that
yeah.
play an instrument. Oh my goodness. You just play it like an angel would play it. Well, not 20 years ago. So
Yeah. You're so talented.
there is talent, all of that.
Lots of practice.
We should be working on ourselves.
Yeah.
Personal development, whether that's personal, spiritual, all of that, personal development. So what you just said is so huge, because you can't expect to step up to the plate, so to speak, and have that impact with someone spiritually without us being ready.
Yeah.
How else, we need to be spending time in the Word and prayer and meditation, and, as we're taught in Scripture in Thessalonians, pray without ceasing.
Yeah.
Well, it's, just praying before a meal and before bed here and there. That's not praying without ceasing. That's not being ready and having that ready answer. You need to be diving into the Word and having that desire, so that when that opportunity presents itself, you recognize it, and maybe you have that word fitly spoken,
Love it. That's exactly what we're all about here at Maranatha. I'm so thankful that we've had the opportunity to get to know several of your kids. It's been a privilege to get to know them and see them grow and develop, and as life comes into perspective for them. Two of your daughters found husbands here, and hopefully those
my
guys
family
are
calls
okay.
this Maranatha.
Oh, okay.
So.
Well, hopefully that's working out all right. I hope that was a good thing.
That's a good thing.
And they found good guys here too, and they're serving the Lord, and we're very proud of them as alumni. And Lane is here as a student, tearing it up, doing a great job. And he has the biggest belt buckles on campus. All right, so
and the biggest voice.
yeah,
Let's
he's
not
a
forget that.
big personality.
Yep,
We
he
love
is.
him, and so it's been awesome to just have a chance to reflect on some of those things and learn from you. Thanks for BAM, Business as Mission. I love it, and we're going to
Awesome.
use that. And thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Awesome.
I
Thank
appreciate
you.
it.
Thank you for joining us today. On Mission is a production of Maranatha Baptist University. Subscribe to On Mission on Apple, Google, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Don't forget to leave a review, as this will help other growing leaders find these conversations. For information about our guests, previous episodes, and general information about On Mission or MBU, go to mbu.edu/podcast. Join us again next week as we examine what keeps leaders on mission.